Humphries played fine. Didn't play great, didn't play terrible either. He won his reps against Benito way more than he lost them. Worthy, Hopkins, Brown is a good trio of receivers. I think there's a chance that he's the Chiefs' primary receiver in the playoffs. I don't think the rest hurts them at all. There is not a single player, including Rashee Rice, that I would have picked to magically get healthy that could have had a bigger impact.
So in today's video, I have an in-depth conversation with Seth Kaiser around the state of the Chiefs as they prepare for the playoff push. We chat through subjects like who should play left tackle, will DeAndre Hopkins get more snaps now, who should lead in carries in the running back room, and even how the hopeful return of Jaylen Watson would ignite the defense. So let's get into it. But first, how about those? What's up, everybody? I'm here with Seth Kaiser. You probably recognize his face. You see him on KCSN, Only Weird Games. He's got an awesome Substack, the Chief in the North newsletter. Go subscribe to that if you haven't already. Link is in the description down below. We'll get more into that here in a bit. But Seth, first of all, how are you feeling about the Kansas City Chiefs after the Week 18 game? And the main takeaway possibly being your thoughts on DJ Humphries after that game, because I don't really know what else there is to take away from a 38-0 loss where you're playing third stringers. Linebacker Blake Lynch played 25 snaps on defense, and he was signed to the practice squad 6 days prior. But what are your thoughts on maybe DJ Humphries Week 18 against a great pass rush in the Denver Broncos?
Absolutely. And Lynch was then cut very shortly thereafter.
He was.
They basically gave him an opportunity to create a little bit of a mini resume. So good on him. The only other thing before I talk about DJ Humphries that people could take away is Jaden Hicks was given an opportunity to take on a primary safety role and played really well. That's something to file away for 2025, 2026, because who knows what they might do with the safety position. DJ Humphries was the only real takeaway of the game. By the time they got midway through the third quarter, I was already going back and charting DJ Humphries snaps because I realized I don't want to watch this. There's no reason to watch second stringers and third stringers play against starters who have game planned while the second stringers and third stringers haven't game planned. It's not interesting. With Humphries, the big thing for me was what's really important with offensive line play. Everyone gets caught up in one or two snaps, good or bad. And in his case, he had two really bad snaps, one that resulted in Wentz getting hit, and one where Nick Benito came screaming off the edge for a sack. Really rough rep. It is kind of funny. I was chatting with Jason Dunn, the former Chiefs tight end with Chiefs concerns, and he and I were kind of joking around about the fact that particular rush, any tackle that wasn't really just sprinting for the top of the arc would have gotten beaten around the corner like that. But that doesn't mean it's not concerning because it's something that Chiefs fans aren't necessarily used to seeing. So what I do is I chart wins, losses, and neutral plays against pass rushers and as a run blocker. No one really cares how DJ Humphries looked as a run blocker because that's not really what you're getting paid for to be left tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs. For me, the biggest thing, and this is a great pass rush, by the way. Just on a side note, that shoulder dip and cornering, very few guys can do that. And that's why you see a guy just end up sprawled on the ground. So here's what's interesting to me in reviewing DJ Humphries snaps is how dissimilar the game plan was from how they've played the last several weeks against the Texans and against the Steelers. And a little bit eventually against the Browns, the ball was coming out very quickly. You had a lot of rolling pockets. You had a lot of sliding protections. You had a lot of tight end chips, a lot of game planning stuff saying, hey, Joe Thuney, we understand you're playing out of position. You're a great player, but you're playing out of position. We're going to help you out as much as possible. Andy Reid did the opposite with DJ Humphries for the most part. There were a couple of running back chips, which a lot of tackles don't really like. And one of the plays that he got blamed for a pressure, it was actually P. Ryan that knocked Benito right inside away from Humphries and gave him a clear rush lane, which is one reason why a lot of tackles don't like chips from running backs helping them. So they took the opposite route with him. He was on an island basically every snap that he was in pass pro. You don't have much sliding protection. You don't have a tight end helping. You don't have the ball coming out quickly. You don't have Wentz rolling any direction. They basically said, here's a great pass rush with a lot of dudes. Let's see what you do. And here's what I would say. Outside of those two snaps, Humphries played fine. Didn't play great. didn't play terrible either. And those 2 snaps were 2 of, I charted 5 losses. And so, I do it a little differently than how ESPN does it. I don't do it based on how close someone gets to the quarterback or something like that, because that's impacted by the play call. It doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the tackle himself. It's, did you get beat on the play? And being left on an island for approximately 22, 23, it was about 21 pass rush reps, left on an island against guys like Benito. It was often Benito. He won his reps against Benito way more than he lost them. Now, it doesn't mean he played great. He didn't. He played fine. He played okay under those circumstances. It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. And what often happens with us is we look at what offensive linemen do, and again, we focus on 1 or 2 plays, and then we extrapolate that. But that's not what you should do. You should look, snap it and snap out. And here's the question. It's probably, I'm curious, the number of people, because I've been telling people that. There's a lot of pushback because right now a lot of people are comfortable with Joe Thuney playing left tackle, and I get why. He's done really well under the circumstances. But one thing that I would note is you're really comparing apples and oranges when you compare what Humphries did versus what Thuney has been doing in terms of game planning, in terms of protecting the tackle, in terms of receivers being open to where the ball can come out quickly. And if I wanted to, I haven't, because I feel like people would think that I was coming down on a great player who has done something unprecedented, which is what Joe Thuney's doing. If I wanted to, I could clip from every game he started at left tackle, times where he's either been pushed right into Mahomes' lap or where he's been beaten very quickly around the edge in a way that would have affected the play, except the ball was out, or he was already rolling right, or there was already help that was coming from another direction. Does that mean Thuney's been playing poorly? Absolutely not. It just means that he's been playing decently. He's been decent at left tackle as opposed to the elite that he is at guard. So my takeaway from everything was, if that's the floor of DJ Humphries' play, he looked more comfortable than he did against the Chargers a few weeks earlier. He looked like he was in better game shape, although he still wore down a little as the game moved along. That's concerning. He also didn't look as athletic as he did in his 2023 film before the ACL. He used to be a really athletic guy, that he combined really good lower body athleticism with a really strong punch. Still has that strong punch, controls guys with his upper body, but he doesn't look quite as comfortable moving laterally. Overall, though, if I were trying to compare an apple and an orange and figure out where things stood, I left that game feeling tentatively that the best course of action would be to, if he has good practices and he looks fine, you got another couple weeks to continue your recovery from the ACL, I would start off with Humphries at left tackle, massively upgrade left guard. Caliendo has been a liability in pass protection. It's been really, really rough. A lot of people have noticed the run game, but not the pass protection as much. That's been rough. Hayward, who's a great player, just ate him alive. Putting Joe Thuney there is a massive upgrade, and you can get roughly equivalent play, maybe a slight downgrade from Thuney to Humphries at the left tackle spot. That's what I took away reviewing every snap in terms of his win-loss percentage overall, not just focusing on 1 or 2 plays.
Yeah, he had a couple rough reps specifically later on in that game when he started to wear down. Part of me wonders if Mile High Stadium played a little bit of a role there. Not trying to make excuses. It's just a lack of in-game reps and conditioning there. But then Mile High maybe played a little bit more of a role. I noticed the Joe Thuney issue in the run game for sure. Not as much with the Mike Caliendo issue and the pass protection aspect of things. But it's interesting to hear you say that, because my takeaway from that game was I really feel like, even just from a pass pro standpoint and in the run game too, moving Thuney back inside, as long as Humphries can play at a serviceable level, I feel like that's your best 5.
It is, if he can play at a serviceable level. And again, what I saw from Humphries, given the situation and given the opponent and the entire context, again, there's no game planning. The ball's not coming out fast. You got a quarterback who is kind of a statue in the pocket, wasn't really as mobile. You got receivers that, other than Remigio, aren't really getting open. There's just nothing there helping the tackle succeed at all. Whereas one of the things I'm actually about to write about, I'm going to combine the Patrick Mahomes film reviews from weeks 15, 16, and 17. I'm going to note how few multiple read plays is how I chart them, what I call them, as in plays that are pure dropbacks where you're going from one side of the field to the other, going read, as opposed to having something that's a little more set. Like a screen is the easiest one, a quick screen or an RPO or something. there weren't nearly as many of them as there had been previously in the offense. And that's one way you protect your left tackle. And that's really smart to do, especially against great edge rushers and a guy playing out of position. The pass protection stuff with Caliendo is more, the Chiefs have been able to leave their left guard on an island in pass protection for years now. And now they can't. And it's not that Caliendo's been terrible. He's been below average. And that's where it can get really tough. Like, for example, I charted every one of his snaps against Houston, him and Thuney. For frame of reference, I'm looking at it right now when I wrote about Humphries versus Denver. Humphries, I charted 5 pass block losses, gave up 1 pressure, 3 hits, and 1 sack. So that's kind of close to what PFF came up with in terms of that. But it's 5 pass block losses total. Joe Thuney against Houston, I charted him as having 8 losses. I charted Caliendo as having 7. The difference between 7 and Joe Thuney is normally like 1, if that. It's a huge, huge difference, and it affects how you can play. And the more concerning aspect of that, and again, Joe Thuney's been way more than anyone should have expected from him moving from left guard to left tackle midway through the season. But when you get 8 pass block losses in a game, which was the case against Houston, where the scheme is specifically designed to protect you, that's demonstrative that you're playing fine, just not great. And so if you can get that serviceable level out of Humphries, your best 5 by far is with Thuney at left guard. And here's the other side of it. If you try that and it's not working, Humphries just can't be serviceable, even with some of the protection that they're giving Thuney right now, which one part of that protection will be he'll have Joe Thuney right to his right. That's very helpful. You can always go back to what you're currently doing. I don't think it's as easy to insert Humphries in mid-game if there's some kind of problem with Caliendo and you want to move things around or that sort of thing. So I think that would be tentatively the route I would go if I were Andy Reid. But it's a tough decision because you do risk altering certain things that have been working decently. But fortunately, they've got so long, so many days, 2/3 of a month to really figure it out. And I think ultimately it may come down to a conversation with Mahomes saying, do you feel comfortable with Humphries there if we move Thuney to left guard? And if he says yes, then I think you go for it.
All right, real quick, I want to shout out a couple ways you can support the channel. You can get some HBTC coffee of Benchwarmer Brew. This has got origin notes of Mexico and Ethiopia, a smooth medium roast, and it is one of the most popular blends of the lineup. Then you can also snag some HBTC merch. We've got Dad Bod Season, X Factor in honor of Dante Hall, mixed with Xavier Worthy, of course, and much more. Links to both the coffee and merch are in the description down below. This is probably the most I've ever talked about offensive line stuff. I just feel like it's so important heading into the playoffs with the rotation, the revolving door at left tackle. And a lot of people, they have praised Joe Thuney a lot for the left tackle play he's had, and I agree, he's done a great job. But on the flip side of that, what you said, Mahomes' second quickest time to throw and his quickest time to throw of the entire season were 2 of those weeks where they had Joe Thuney in there. So the lack of run game, it was extended with the quick passing game, but it also kind of affected your ability to do some other things at times as well. So if you could maybe, in a perfect world, allow Mahomes a little bit more time to throw and let some other stuff develop, like, I love that idea. But at the same time, some people are saying, like, hey, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Go into these playoff games with the quick throws, because you put up nearly 30 points on the Texans and the Steelers, 2 playoff teams who are struggling, to be honest with you, but they are 2 playoff teams, and the Chiefs looked really good on offense. How have you felt about the return of Hollywood Brown and how you feel like he's going to continue to help this offense in the playoffs, and then maybe even potentially the unleashing of DeAndre Hopkins if they don't have a snap percentage to keep him under? Yeah. What are your thoughts on that with the offense as well?
I'm really intrigued. One of the takeaways that I came away from with reviewing the last few weeks, because that's a big change that occurred also, is Hollywood Brown came back. There's a domino effect that comes into play when you bring in a new receiver and a better receiver, especially one that can line up all over the field and threaten all 3 levels of the field like Hollywood Brown can, compared to, Justin Watson taking those snaps, etc. All due respect to Justin Watson, I feel like I'm always dogging the guy, and I feel bad about that, but there's just a difference in ability to open up there. There's a domino effect there, not just because of the guy on the field taking the snaps, but who's not on the field taking snaps. It creates a threat everywhere else on the field. One of my takeaways that it's actually led me to grab a few video clips of just Hollywood Brown. There's a chance Brown blows up in the playoffs because he's done pretty well, but him and Mahomes have also not been on the same page a few times, and Mahomes has had a few inaccurate throws to him. He actually could have probably 4 or 5 more catches, probably an extra 60 to 80 yards if they'd been on the same page a few different times. There was one play in particular where they're playing up against, I think it was some variation of cover 3, where Brown just isn't used to the sight adjustments that Mahomes is expecting. So he keeps turning to outside. Mahomes throws it right into that gap between the safety and the corner. And he's expecting Brown to turn back to his left, kind of the Travis Kelce, right? Make that sight adjustment. You see Brown realize it, but kind of not at the last moment. He turns the wrong way. And just things like that. There's opportunities there. He is separating against man coverage. You can kind of tell maybe that it was an upper body injury to where his legs look fine. He's playing fast. He's opening up against man coverage. He's finding gaps in zone. I think there's a chance that he's the Chiefs' primary receiver in the playoffs.
Okay. I like to hear that. And I love the return of Hollywood Brown and how that's even further opened up. Like, I feel like Xavier Worthy has benefited from that too. Everybody else has, but Xavier Worthy's target share went up even after that too. And I thought, well, maybe Worthy's would dip slightly with the return of Brown, but it kind of went up. Again, I'm not going to read too much into a small 2-game sample size there, but what about DeAndre Hopkins? Do you feel like they have, that has officially become a 5th-round pick that they had to give the Titans, by the way, and not a 4th because he played under 60% of snaps. So the stipulation was 60% of snaps and Super Bowl. He played 49%. So we're good there. Do you feel like they're going to play him more? Will they unleash DeAndre Hopkins a little bit more in the playoffs? Or is this also still a bit of a load management thing just based on the fact he's a little bit older, 33 years old? I guess my only pushback to that is Travis Kelce plays like 98% of snaps and he's 35. So what are your thoughts on that?
It's been so crazy that this is the year they've decided, you know what we're going to do? We're going to play you like every snap, Travis. Like, I don't
Chris
understand
Jones
it,
too.
but yeah, Chris Jones, same thing. They are just every ounce of the other 2/3 of the triumvirate of the Chiefs dynasty. They are going to get every snap out of them. So with Hopkins, he's so situationally important. He's able to win one-on-one matchups. He doesn't open up against man as well as he used to, but he's still a guy who, even when he's not open, he's open. He draws penalties because guys try to play him physically, and he's able to kind of get away with a few things here and there. I would assume that you're going to see his snap count probably rise up to something like 75%, something like that. It would really surprise me if they didn't. The big thing that why you might not see it get higher than that beyond just load management is some of the things that they really like having their receivers do. They like having Juju Smith-Schuster do. And those are, some of those quick screens to Xavier Worthy. They want Juju Smith-Schuster in front of him because that guy blocks his tail off.
Great blocker.
And great blocker. And he's happy to do it. And Hopkins has been involved in some of those too. One of my favorite things that they've done this year is they've had a few times where they'll stack Worthy and Hopkins, and you've got a defender playing press man coverage, and you stack them with Worthy a little behind Hopkins, and let Hopkins, who's huge and also plays very strong, just knock the corner's block off and let Worthy get a free release. It's kind of like having your big brother fight your fights for you. I do think because Juju Smith-Schuster does some of those things, I think he'll see the field some. I think because Justin Watson does some of those same things, he'll still see the field some. And with Watson, he'll execute those things and can still, just in a tiny bit, threaten down the field in a way Juju can't at all. So I think you'll still see a rotation of those guys at times. But my assumption, mostly for my own sanity, is that you're going to see DeAndre Hopkins on the field more like 70-75% of the time. You're going to see Hollywood Brown on the field, probably a higher percentage. Worthy, Hopkins, and Brown is a good trio of receivers, a legitimate good trio. And my assumption is you're going to see a lot of that. I think there's a chance. They love having Gray on the field. They love having Kelce on the field, of course. I think you might see a little more empty. I think you might see a little more. That's one thing they did with Pittsburgh to try to counteract the pass rush, is you line up empty, and then you just let your quarterback read the field and see who opens up first, because you can ID man versus zone a lot better with empty looks. So I think you will. see a lot more of Hopkins because it just makes too much sense. But because of some of the specific things they want the receivers doing, I still think we'll see more of Juju and Justin Watson than maybe people realize.
And just with those that you mentioned, even just a slight uptick of D-Hop and really just the return of Hollywood Brown in general, Xavier Worthy being more than just a deep threat, they're kind of using him in a bunch of different ways too, which I'm liking to see. But that has to help free up Travis Kelce even more so, right? I mean, you've got to pick your poison. You're going to who you doubling, and if you double one, it frees up Kelce. If you then double Kelce the whole time, frees up another. Your assumption there would be Kelce might feast again in the playoffs, or I mean, it depends on who you play, I know, but
I think it depends on who you play because there are certain situations. Let's say they play the Chargers and Derwin James just lines up on man with him. James was getting the better of him a few years ago. My guess is that would continue now. Some of it, I think, depends on whether teams stick with what the Texans and the Steelers tried unsuccessfully, which was a lot of man coverage looks. We've seen a lot of that lately. Part of that was because teams were having a lot of success with it earlier in the year. The thing is, Xavier Worthy can beat man coverage, Hollywood Brown can beat man coverage, DeAndre Hopkins can beat man coverage. Kelce doesn't beat man coverage the way he did even last year. He's just lost a little extra step there. And we'll see how he does in the playoffs. Last year we saw, you've been saving yourself this whole time. I don't know how he would have been saving himself this whole time, playing all these snaps, but maybe. I think you're going to see kind of a shift back and forth. I think when you see teams playing a lot of man coverage, you're going to see a lot of the receivers getting work in terms of some of the things that Reed does to punish man coverage with some of the trip stuff with wide receiver screens, taking advantage of numbers, some of the different crossers and that kind of stuff, the mesh concepts. Those more feature the receivers. And then I think if teams are unsuccessful with that, I think then you'll see them shift to some zone looks, and that's when you'll see Kelce just do his age-old, I'm just going to run to where they're not and turn around and the ball will be there stuff.
I always laugh. I feel like he does this way more than we even think, and maybe not way more than you think. You're watching a lot of film, but I swear every single time we hear them post-game, Mahomes is like, yeah, he just ran his own route there. I mean, it's like, I feel like half the time Mahomes is like, all right, I'm just going to look Kelce's way, see if he sees what I'm seeing, and we're just going to make something happen.
Yes. I happen to know for a fact that Travis Kelce sometimes is just, they call out the rest of the play. And it's like, and hey, Kelce, do the thing. Just go get open. See how it looks, which is not how Andy Reid does things. I'm so curious what the offense will look like one day when Travis does hang it up, because Andy is so much of a controlled chaos guy, and he's bent so many of his rules because of how great Travis and Mahomes are at kind of working together with that. But that's it really is just pure ad-libbing, reading defenses and seeing the same thing at the same time. You couldn't do it with a different quarterback, and you couldn't do it with a different receiver or tight end.
Before I get to the next segment, did you guys know that I have an NFL-wide news channel covering all things NFL outside of the Kansas City Chiefs? It's called Cole Breaks the Huddle, and I do a very poor job of letting you guys know that I run a second channel where we drop multiple videos a week covering big picture NFL news. So if you enjoy my style of content with the editing, the pacing, and all that, but want to hear it from an NFL-wide perspective, this is the channel for you. Link is in the description down below. I got a two-part question for you here. They're not even directly related, but I'll ask both of them and just kind of let you piggyback one into the other. In 2020, the Chiefs had 21 days of rest, basically. The key starters, they rested versus the Chargers. They had the first round bye. They played the Browns. They ended up beating them. Mahomes did get kind of hurt in that game. He had to leave the game. He got choked out. They thought maybe concussion at first, but I really think he got choked out because it was just a really weird ordeal, to be honest with you. Are you worried about the rest? Do you think that's more beneficial than anything else? That's kind of my stance with the rest. But then part two for you is when they come back from all this rest and the divisional round hits, what are your thoughts on the running back room, especially if Joe Thuney kicks back inside and that helps the run game? Are you concerned at all about Pacheco, just how he's looked coming back post-injury? And are you, hey, see how it goes with Kareem and Pacheco, or are you like, nah, dude, let Kareem go, specifically short yardage situations? Like, where are your thoughts on the running back room? I have a lot of respect for Pacheco, but he hasn't looked quite the same since coming back from surgery and injury, and maybe he won't have that burst completely back until next year. But I'd love to know your thoughts on the rest, the running back room.
Sure. I'll try to remember. Two-parter, that's a lot. Here's just something that I was looking at this while you asked. Something that people often don't remember because that particular playoff game in 2020 against the Browns ended with a 22-17 win for the Chiefs. Because Mahomes got hurt. So they'd had 20 days rest, basically, a day or two less than what they're going to have here. These are the first two drives before Patrick Mahomes got hurt. 10 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. Then Cleveland got a field goal after 12 plays. Second drive for the Chiefs, 7 plays, 75 yards, touchdown. Cleveland had to punt. The Chiefs were on their way to scoring before Mahomes got hurt. I want to say it was midway through the drive. They'd worked their way. Oh no, I'm sorry. They ended up with a field goal, and then Mahomes got hurt the next drive. So all three of the drives that Patrick Mahomes was healthy, they scored. 2 of the 3 of them touchdowns. The offense didn't look rusty at all. It looked incredible. I think they were on their way to hanging a 40-burger on the Browns. And then he got hurt. Chad Henne steps in, did the best he could, but Cleveland had a good roster that year, good defense, and allowed them to creep back into the game. I don't think the rest hurts them at all. Andy Reid is famous for running tough practices. This is a team that has played more football than anyone else in the league the last 4 or 5 years. The rest is way, way better for them. You're not going to get rust when famously, the 2 hardest workers the Chiefs have at practice are Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce. And I know Chris Jones is up there with the defense. All 3 of them are first ballot Hall of Famers. When they're all, they're the triumvirate, they're the guys that are the core of the dynasty. When those guys are working that hard, you're not going to end up with a rust issue. They'll practice with pads maybe a little more than they would otherwise, but I'm not worried about that even a little. It's only a good thing, especially for guys that are a little older, like Travis Kelce or DeAndre Hopkins, or still recovering from an ACL, like Charles Omenihu and DJ Humphries, or guys that got nicked up, like Shamari Connor. It's only a good thing. Or a guy who might unexpectedly come back, like Jaylen Watson. It's only a good thing with regards to that. And for the life of me, the running back situation. If I were Andy Reid, based on how they've played since Pacheco came back, I would treat Kareem Hunt as generally the primary. I would have Samaje Perine be the third down back. Perine, I would love to see more involved in the offense. Every time he's out there, he does a great job in pass protection. He's got really soft hands. You can tell Mahomes has started to really trust him. He will lay guys out, helping out. He'll put his body on the line. He just does a great job with it overall. I think he should consistently be the third down back. I think Kareem Hunt should be the primary back. One thing, Pacheco doesn't look quite as explosive since coming back, but one thing that has become fairly clear watching Hunt, who has no explosion left, but has good vision and always has, Pacheco's lack of superior vision has been more apparent watching him run some of the same power and gap-based things that Hunt had been running pretty successfully. He just doesn't hit that hole or see it quite as quickly. And that because he doesn't have elite explosion, that can come back and haunt him. So I really would have it be Pacheco in there spelling Hunt with Perine as the third down back.
I think it's funny. You got some guys will just straight up share stats with you, and they'll just compare Pacheco's stats over the last 3 years to Hunt's. And I'm like, you can't directly compare Hunt to playing on the Browns and then being injured through his groin injury all last year. He played through that and then needed offseason surgery. I don't feel like you can just straight up compare stats. The vision to me is clear as day. I feel like Hunt has to be in there, short yardage situations. And
especially those.
You can't run a sneak. I mean, they won't do it. Maybe they'll do it in the playoffs. But all these teams, I see them line up on 3rd and 1. I'm like, well, sneak's coming and it's going to be a first down. The Chiefs don't have that. So I pretty much agree with where you are with the running back room.
And that's the vision really, like you said, people can compare stats. And I appreciate Isaiah Pacheco as well. He's a shot of energy into the offense.
Oh, yeah.
He does some things well. He's a valuable player. He should see the field. But you can just tell the difference, especially on some of the stuff they've had success with this year in terms of exploiting the light boxes that we get. Between the tackles, Hunt is just a better runner.
And that's, again, to anybody listening, watching, that's no disrespect to Pacheco. I'm very thankful for what he's done. For the 7th-round draft pick that he's been, like, his value has been awesome, and he's been great. It's just, I think with Hunt here, you need to utilize that even if it's just for the rest of the season. I mean, there's a real weapon there with his vision. Last question, then we'll get you out of here, but you mentioned it, and I did want to touch on it. Jaylen Watson's 21-day window to return is opened up. That's obviously was the cornerback 2, for the most part, opposite Trent McDuffie, and that really helped the defense. I mean, they looked good, very good, and a lot of metrics. He went down. All the main stats dipped, EPA per play, like all the stuff dipped. We know that. His 21-day window to return is open. If he has a chance of playing in the divisional round, maybe it's not till the AFC Championship if you obviously win in the divisional round. What are your thoughts on that and how he could look? Similar injury to Pacheco, not quite the same. Some even say worse, but he's out there cutting, running around. He attacked his rehab. Give me thoughts on Jaylen Watson and his return post-surgery.
I would say with Watson, so we'll do a caveat. It's all a caveat of if he's healthy. Okay? Because if he's not healthy, none of this, then no, he won't really make much of an impact. I've said this in a few different mediums, so I'll say it here too. If he's healthy, there is not a single player, including Rashee Rice, that I would have picked to magically get healthy that could have had a bigger impact. And there's multiple reasons for that. The domino effect with a corner that you trust in all situations is huge. And Jaylen Watson's been consistently competent his entire career. He seemed to have taken another step this year to go from being a competent corner to a good one. And there's levels to that. You know, you've got average corners, competent corners, good corners, great corners. McDuffie's great. But right now, they have 2 guys that they trust in man coverage. They've got McDuffie, they've got Williams. The thing with Williams is at times he jumps things a little bit more than he should, and he doesn't always pass off receivers the way he ought to in zone. He kind of takes the cheese, as they say occasionally, and finds himself out of position. Najee Johnson, unfortunately, just doesn't look like he's got quite the explosion that he's used to having. He's struggled in man coverage. I like some things that Chris Roland Wallace has done, but he's not a boundary corner. With Watson, he's a guy who can play man coverage as well as Williams, but they trust him. He's always been really solid in zone coverage. He's really solid contesting the ball. He plays incredibly physically. That's a huge thing with the Chiefs. Their corners, especially when it's Williams and Watson and McDuffie, they play really physical. You don't get away with screens. You don't give up the edge. You don't give up big runs. A long touchdown run that came, when Najee Johnson got sat in favor of Josh Williams, was to his side. A receiver blocked him out of the play in a way that never would have happened those 3. With Watson, you have more consistency, and that allows Spags to cook in a different way than what he's able to do when he doesn't trust the man coverage back there. So if you suddenly have 3 guys that you trust in man coverage again, your blitzing options become much easier because you can trust guys to be left on an island for just a split second longer. And the other thing, and there's a bunch to it, I actually wrote about this on the Chief of North newsletter. I was so excited about it because of the domino effect, the effect it has on the pass rush. One of the biggest things, other than just, hey, we've got a good corner. We've improved that, which now means our cornerback 3 is improved because now our cornerback 4 is hardly on the field. Like that, it's a huge deal. It's similar to putting in Hollywood Brown and bumping everyone else down a notch. But the biggest thing for me, in addition to just having a better cornerback out there, is if you have 2 guys that you trust in man coverage on the boundary, in Watson and Williams, you can, if you want, unlock your I'm going to erase the middle of the field mode with Trent McDuffie, which they have not been able to do as much for most of this season after Watson got hurt, especially because they just didn't have anyone else they trusted consistently. So I love that because he's such a weapon there, shutting down slot receivers, being able to follow guys inside, a threat to blitz, against the run, all that stuff. So I could not be more excited than, his return and Charles Omenahu's return is like neck and neck in terms of importance to the overall defense. And it's a shot for them to be better than they've been all year on defense. I'm so excited about it.
Do you read into maybe a confidence of Jaylen Watson's return based on the fact that Steven Nelson has not done anything at all? I didn't have a lot of high hopes for the guy, but I thought if they wanted to potentially use him in the playoffs, they would do with him what they did with DJ Humphries. Play him week 18 and kind of see what he has. Like, what are your thoughts with that? I mean, right now it's just a break in case of emergency guy, I guess, but maybe that bolsters confidence for the potential return of Jaylen Watson. If they're like, well, if he's returning, we don't really need to see what we have in Steven Nelson.
That's the only reason I can think of that they would do that. The other thing is that Spags likes his guys. That is true. I mean, that's why, you trade for Joshua Uche and then you're like, we don't need to play him ever. Not that he's the second coming of Derek Thomas, but he probably could provide some pressure from the edge every now and then, but whatever, So the thing with Steven Nelson has been a little weird to me because last year he was not a high level corner, but he was a decent boundary corner, which is exactly what they've needed. So that's been a little off to me, but we do know one thing I've seen for sure as the season's moved along, and it's like this every year with Spags, that the coverages and disguises and rotations have gotten more and more complicated every week. Basically every snap against the Steelers, what they showed about 4 or 5 seconds before the snap versus what they did at the snap was different. They had guys rotating all over the place. And it just might be that he trusts his guys to be where he wants them to be and he trusts his system. If I were them, I'd promote Nelson, partly because I just don't think – I think Johnson right now is getting targeted whenever he's out there. Roland Wallace, not as much, but he's maybe a little more limited to the slot. So I think that's probably how they're viewing it. I just kind of wish they wouldn't.
Yeah, it was definitely a confusing one with Steven Nelson. But, hey, I'm really encouraged about the potential return of Jaylen Watson. Liked what I saw enough from DJ Humphries. We've talked all kinds of stuff. Hollywood, Travis Kelce, D-Hop, and I appreciate your time so much. Make sure, guys, to give Seth a good follow on Twitter. Again, his Substack is great. He's always updating articles multiple times a week. Maybe it slows down a little in the offseason. I don't know, but you're at least a couple a week, and the content is quality. I like your analysis. You're not really speaking with bias. You're just kind of looking at the film and sharing what you see based on that, and I've always appreciated that. I don't like to read. I don't really read ever if possible because that's why I do YouTube. I just love the idea of learning visually, but I do read your stuff. Sure. I think it's that valuable and that worth it. So appreciate your time. And I know you got to jump to another interview, but thanks again, man. Can't wait to have you on again.
It sounds great. I appreciate you having me.